And so today I want to map out the role that international development can play in addressing the challenges of terrorism. In doing so, I want to focus on three of DfID's programs: Yemen, Pakistan and Somalia, where our work to reduce poverty and tackle instability also, I think, makes a really important contribution actually to the UK's national security. But first I want to put this in context. As I said in an interview I did in the Times the Saturday before last, my analysis of what's going on in North Africa and the Middle East is that the turmoil is primarily economic, demographic and secular. It is not religious or ideological. The demonstrations we've been watching are not driven by Islamic fundamentalism. If there's one word that drives it, it's jobs. And if these issues are not addressed, Islamic fundamentalism risks becoming the main vehicle through which people seek redress and which others can seize on for terrorist purposes. At the moment, it's about young people who account for 1/3 of the working age population in most of these countries, but who also account for almost 50% of the region's unemployment. And as Sheila Stewart, I'm sure, will have mentioned, there's a massive danger in leaving aspirations and grievances unaddressed. Social grievances caused by unequal access to services like health and education, and economic grievances harboured by hundreds of thousands of young people denied economic opportunities. Now, security and justice are vital. People want to feel safe. But security on its own is not enough. It needs to go hand in hand with justice and respect for human rights. Political inclusion is also critical. Resentments grow when people have little or no say in how their country is run. Where discontent about the lack of voice and opportunity intersects with other fault lines, such as social exclusion and discrimination along ethnic or tribal lines, this makes for a potent cocktail. Now, this is why development matters for security. Conflict and instability is a fundamental barrier to development and poverty reduction. DfID's work to tackle the root causes of instability can help to address the lack of security and justice, economic and social and political grievances, and the very conditions that terrorists seek to exploit. So let's take the case of Yemen, which even before the recent upheaval was experiencing a high level of instability and a significant terrorist threat. We know that in Yemen, a lack of access to justice, to jobs and basic services, combined with weak governance, have been driving grievances and contributing to instability, and have been creating an environment in which violent extremism can incubate and become established. Now, weak governance in Yemen means the failure to share, for instance, national oil revenues, which could provide much more social services and welfare. It means widespread corruption. It means the repressive behaviour of the security services, and it means the lack of political inclusion, because government institutions are weak and people have very little say in what affects their life. Now, this situation allows al-Qaeda to question government legitimacy and exploit social and economic vulnerabilities. The chaotic political and security environment provides them with havens, opportunities to work with other groups in the region, particularly in Somalia, and opportunities for recruitment. It allows al-Qaeda to seize on grievance and convert it into a potent force for instability. In Yemen, addressing the risk of state failure and the opportunities this might create for terrorism is a priority for this government. In reflecting this, the UK has committed in the bilateral aid review to substantially boost our aid to Yemen. But we'll only do so if we can see a clear commitment from the government there to political and economic reform. We will continue to press for that sort of reform through the Friends of Yemen process, and the meeting in Riyadh next week on Tuesday and Wednesday is a key opportunity to secure Government of Yemen commitment to that sort of reform. We'll help to address unemployment through support for a programme that will create 38,000 new jobs and provide almost 100,000 individuals and firms with access to financial services. We will support the Social Fund for Development to provide basic services reaching 1.8 million people. The Social Fund for Development doesn't just provide services, it also provides a political space for communities to air their grievances at their local level. It ensures that district councils are more accountable, and it counters the extremists' argument that government does not listen and does not provide services. So while DfID's programmes directly support the poorest, and DfID remains committed to OEC definitions on what counts as aid, they also maximise the contribution of aid to UK and international security. Development matters to security in Pakistan as well. Pakistan has the potential to be a functioning democracy, but it also faces enormous development and security challenges and its own threat of terrorism. So we need to wrestle with the extent to which radicalization and violent extremism in Pakistan can be exacerbated by problems associated with poor governance, sectarian violence, limited access to security and justice, a lack of economic opportunities, poor quality education, and an exclusive elite power structure. These factors all fuel grievances and governance vacuums, and increase the vulnerability of communities to extremist influence and control, and the hold of militants on some parts of the country. The unequal provision of quality education is a widespread source of grievance and is linked with vulnerability to radicalization. We know that the no education or bad education helps to foster intolerance and militancy. And in some areas of Pakistan, there is evidence of a link between unemployment and vulnerability to radicalization. We will address access, the quality and content of mainstream education through DfID's programs, and we'll be helping 4 million children to attend school, and we'll be targeting young adults to receive better technical and vocational training. We're also supporting the Punjab Economic Opportunities Programme to provide skills training for 250,000 people and to create employment opportunities for 200,000 in the 4 poorest districts of Punjab province. These districts border the tribal districts of Punjab, where a large number of youths have been recruited by militant organisations. So, therefore, promoting strong development outcomes in education and employment will also contribute to the UK's national security objective to counter the broader threat of terrorism. And we need to be honest. Work to address conflict and instability and help to tackle the conditions that support terrorism is very difficult. We've got to be realistic. We have to adjust our approach to the context, and we have to be ready to learn lessons. And Somalia is perhaps the toughest test we face. It's a failed state and has been so for nearly 2 decades. Conflict at national and local levels has resulted in a breakdown of law and order and an almost complete collapse of the state. The conflict has important regional as well as international dimensions. The instability and conflict has allowed al-Qaeda-inspired extremist groups to establish themselves and operate, just the right conditions for the terrorist threat to develop and become entrenched. In Somalia, the evidence shows that addressing political grievance is crucial. We recognise that stable authority in Somalia will not come from a central state, but from homegrown, local forms of governance and regional administrations that reflect clan and sub-clan agreements. The emerging evidence is that most progress has been made in Somalia through Somali-led political processes and not donor-led interventions, however well-intentioned those interventions might be. And it suggests that it's critical that the relatively stable areas of Somalia get better and not worse, so that people can see a stability dividend. Providing basic services, including security and justice and jobs, is crucial. You've got to reduce incentives to participate in violence. You've got to undermine reliance on militia for security, incomes and services. And you've got to shift expectations for a stable future from extremists or warlords towards legitimate and accountable institutions. This evidence base forms the framework for DfID's work in Somalia. We put inclusive politics at the heart of our approach. Since 2006, DfID has supported an international NGO to initiate peace processes leading to 24 local peace accords throughout the country. DfID is also supporting a governance and peace-building programme which has strengthened 10 local authorities across Somalia to work with communities and to provide basic services. It's supported civil society groups to hold government to account, and it has supported reconciliation of local communities for sustainable peace. In such an insecure country, improving access to security and justice is also crucial. We will train 3,000 Somaliland police in human rights and increase the number of cases dealt with through formal justice systems. And we'll work to help build sustainable employment and to give people a real alternative to conflict, crime and terrorism. UK aid will help to create long-term jobs for 45,000 people and to help their businesses grow. As part of our commitment in Somalia, we're investing in an innovative monitoring, research and evaluation system that should allow us to test whether targeting youth unemployment, for example, will result in fewer people following pathways into conflict, crime and terrorism. And we will also carry out work on value for money to find a sensible metric that helps us to quantify the savings made from successful preventative measures. Our findings will inform not just UK aid to Somalia, but others in the international community who recognise that this is a gap in understanding for us all. And getting it right will have a multiplier effect on peace and stability more broadly. The Strategic Defence and Security Review committed the UK to spending 30% of its official development assistance to support conflict-affected and fragile states. This investment is vital for poverty reduction in some of the poorest countries in the world. But DfID's programmes in the countries I've talked about today and in other conflict-affected and fragile states where we work don't just contribute to development, they also help to make us more secure. The underlying causes of instability are complex. In every case, the prescription will be different. That's why we invest in studies to better understand, on a country-by-country basis, the drivers of radicalization and of conflict. Research shows that poverty alone is not a driver of radicalization, but the evidence suggests that grievances are exploited by terrorists. DfID's work therefore plays a vital enabling role in addressing grievances and the conditions that allow terrorist threats to develop. Working in highly unstable environments isn't easy. There have been successes and there have been lessons learnt. Continuing to learn lessons will be crucial, because if we do not do so, we may fail to achieve our objectives or indeed make the situation even worse. But we've been able to start to build a more systematic understanding of what factors matter and how we can respond to them through our programmes. We know that inclusive politics matter and that effective institutions matter. Security and justice and the rule of law matter, and education and jobs matter. We need to ensure our development is conflict sensitive and that aid money does no harm and goes where it's needed most. We are stepping up our monitoring systems to ensure this. Development is only part of the story, and DfID's work is complementary to the work of others. We will continue to support the government's efforts to counter terrorism, working with the Foreign Commonwealth Office and the Home Office, by building the evidence base on the drivers of radicalisation and addressing these drivers through our country programmes. But if development is only part of the story, it is an essential part of the government's response, both to the threat that international terrorism presents right now and the longer-term challenges it poses for the future. In DfID, we are deeply committed to doing our bit to help counter violent extremism. We hope that in the work we do, we can be effective in draining that swamp of grievance and help to make these countries and the wider world a much safer place to live in. Thank you.